around to the Lumwana village and also give you some tips and tools for your tool belt in terms of anthropology, cultural anthropology, and how it relates to your upcoming trip and site assessment and the work that we do in Engineers Without Borders. So these tools and tips are provided. So it is really good to look to other organizations who have done a lot of overseas work, development work, in particular the Peace Corps. They are very, very in tune with training up new Peace Corps volunteers on what their role is in the village and how to behave as a visitor to any village. So capacity building is a big point, is a huge part of Peace Corps values. It, of course, is better to teach a man to fish. So rather than telling people what they need to do or giving advice in a very authoritative manner, it is much, much preferred to teach them, show them, work with them, and in the process you will be learning as well. Economic sustainability, small business trade, if it is at all possible while you're there to identify a gap, identify any sort of item or tool or technology that the community does not have under their belt yet, but that they could potentially create a small enterprise and either sell services or products to nearby villages that are, of course, sustainable products. That is a very good point, and we need to try to reach that point. And do no harm. There are consequences of any change, long-term consequences that are unforeseen, and you can't do much about those, but it is good to try to foresee them and get to know the community as well as you can, inside and out. Step away from your own ego and learn about them. And watch them closely. Watch the monitor the project that we implement very closely. And also, you will be living at the same standard of living as those in the village. So if you do have any sort of luxury that you've brought along with you, don't flaunt it. A flashlight, if it's super high-tech, don't go around bragging about it. They might be really interested in seeing anything that you bring for sure. Like a video camera, cameras, you know, these are sorts of things that, yes, that it's going to be amazing to them, but really, really make an effort to live as they're living. We know we have special diets and we like our vitamins and all of these supplements, etc. But if at all possible, try to hide a lot of those things from the village, from them while you're there, and really try to live as they are saying. So, some more values is to not impose Western cultural values. That means avoid talking about what you have at home or in your country unless they specifically ask you. And you will be asked. You will be asked what it's like in the United States. And be real with them. Obviously there are some very good things about the United States, but there are also a lot of dangers. And so reinforce the fact that they have such a strong community and close ties by saying, we have a lot of problems. We've grown very separate. You know, there are lots of fences, a lot more divisions between people
in the United
and
States, that is.
And a lot of times families don't live with their elders, you know, and these are issues that, although we can hide them in the United States with excess wealth and being able to pay for an elder to be cared for by somebody else, that concept is beyond them, and it has broken us apart in many cases. So when you talk about the United States, be real about that the United States is not some fanciful, you know, promised land. And realize that your culture isn't perfect. Learn from what they have. Millennium Development Goals are values for the planet. They are not Western values. So when you're talking about gender equality, although I'm telling you that you need to observe and you need to not judge, at the same time, you do need to recognize that gender equality and eradicating extreme poverty and hunger, improving maternal health, ensuring environmental sustainability, these are all concepts that are values that are for the planet. So just because they haven't stepped through development yet does not. Viewpoints. Look for similarities. You know, it's good to compare, it's good to contrast, but look for what binds us or what holds us together. You know, there are a lot of very similar fabrics between our culture and theirs. And many of you who have traveled overseas or who may have relatives who are not necessarily not American or foreign nationals, wonderful. You already have a leg up. You understand how to integrate that comparison and contrasting, but also knowing how we are all the same into the way that you behave. Notice differences, but be open to them. Don't close yourself off to differences, and especially don't avoid judging them as being bad or classifying them as a category. It is what it is. Observe it, but it is what it is. And avoid speaking about your viewpoint. Try to make it their idea if possible. This is just an example. Fuel for stoves. For example, if they are letting out a complaint saying, we don't have enough fuel for our stoves, we don't necessarily, we can't buy it, we can't afford it, we can't afford to buy charcoal from the store in the next town. Don't necessarily say, well, here's a solution, and here, let me give you a solution. But rather say, I'm listening to you, and I'm understanding what you're saying is, and then repeat what they've been saying. And through your repetition of what they're saying, let the solution emerge. That way it comes from them. It's their idea. They will own it and be far more likely to take pride in it and propagate it at will. So here are some insights about the Lunda. That is the people living in Lumwana. The Lunda region extends quite far, but there is a lot of overlap, of course, between the villages. Standard of living is below poverty. They are subsistence farmers. When they gather any crops, they sell them along the side of the road. The women collect them, sell them along the side of the road. What they cannot sell after it's essentially rotten, then they'll eat. So that creates a significant loss of nutrition, which is quite a problem. And they also can only eat or sell those crops if they're yielding. So they depend on those minor crops. English is the official language in Zambia, but most in the village only speak Lunda. And although the children are learning English in the schools, when they're outside of school, they're speaking Lunda. And in the schools, they're also speaking Lunda in many cases. It's an egalitarian society, which means it's more focused on the family and the community, not as individualistic. We in the United States are generally an individualistic society. So you can compare the way we are. We want our family to be protected. Everything's focused on the family, the unit, as opposed to what's the greater good for the greater whole. Of course, there are people who are selfish in any society, but this is just the way that the society functions. It's a patriarchal society, and Beth's girls are finally respected in the community. This has been about 10 years since they started getting scholarships, the young girls, and they are now very well respected because they're becoming much higher educated. There were issues with them being assaulted by young men who wanted to get them pregnant out of jealousy, but that is changing, and mostly it's because the fathers now are proud of their daughters. So just keep that in mind, that these girls are really getting highly respected, and so please respect them as well, and involve them wherever possible. There will be men who are getting involved in your work, and that's important, because it's still important to have a maintenance guy, and I don't think they're at the point where they can have a maintenance woman yet, though maybe they could have an acolyte or an apprentice who's a female. Maybe you can try to set that up. Deeper level. And respect the leaders. Avoid having favorites. Deeper level. And respect the leaders. Avoid having favorites. Every village family has a headman, and so make sure you go to all the leaders to find information. So if you're getting excited and you want to jump to a conclusion, write it down, keep a notebook, write it all down, and then tell Mr. Angeloma that you need to have a meeting. And you should definitely be having a meeting anyway with them once you're in the village, but keep all that information and those conclusions that you're deriving, write them down, keep them as options, and then at the meeting you can write them on the board as options, or say, somebody brought up a good point. We would like to discuss this. What do you all think about that point? For example, one person might say, the well needs to go here, this is why, this is the best solution. You might be really excited and say, oh, that's a great solution, I agree, I completely agree, we need to have the well here. But those are the exact sorts of things you need to keep in mind and write it down and then take it to the meeting and propose that to everybody. Also, one other really important point is to not make any promises. It's very common for organizations working in the developing world to make promises that they can't necessarily keep due to funding or technological difficulties or cultural difficulties of it integrating, etc. So never ever ever make promises, but say we are working on it, we are trying very hard, you know, it's hard to fundraise, but we know you guys are really well worth it, and we know you want to put in the effort, and we are here to help work with you to create the end goal. And Mr. Angelomba is highly respected, and you will respect him insanely as well. I mean, he beat me in chess very, very fast. And then I consider myself a decent chess player, like, I play a lot. So anyway, very, very intelligent, very well read, he speaks English very well, he is the headmaster of the school, so respect him, and I'm sure you're going to have no problem with that. High Chief Sailunga passed away recently. A new High Chief is there, and very luckily, not luckily, but fortunately, during the last, visit, the new chief, I don't recall his name, but he accepted us and was pleased to partner with us to build this. That's very positive as well. So some quick tips: don't call the people villagers. They find it demeaning. They are people, Lunda, community members, but typically just people, not villagers. Journal. I gave you guys Write in the Rain books. They should have been given to Nicole and maybe Cheryl, but keep those Write in the Rain books with you and write everything down. Write sketches, ideas, dimensions, write observations, thoughts, and you know, and in addition to debriefing as a group every night, you've got to create a plan of the day every morning, meet, and then meet at night to debrief. Also have personal debriefs, you know, go for a walk and write and sketch. And you will be safe, you will be treated with respect in the village, so return the courtesy and respect for the community members. I almost slipped up there. Involve best girls when possible. They are wonderful, they know English and can help with translation, questions. Forrest and I actually had a couple of the best girls who are in middle school, about 12 and 13, help us for all the chemical testing. So they showed us where all the different rivers are where people collect water. They translated for us. Then they helped us collect the samples, test the samples, take the temperature, bring it back, and do all the chemical tests in the library. Those girls were wonderful. I mean, just so helpful. Yeah, they giggled and joked about us, but they were just so funny and so delightful. So if you need any volunteers, or if you don't, get some volunteers. Have them shadow you. It's a very good idea. Just talk to Mr. Angelomba or any of the teachers and say, do you have any female students who could shadow us today? Very good idea, and it was really fun and rewarding. Bring enough food for the whole stay. The women will cook it for you, but cook it with the women if you can. And you'll buy that food in Solway.
Thank you very much. Hope that one worked since the other one didn't. Bye.